Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar, Security Glazing for Schools. This event is part of the two-day Resilient Design Symposium brought to you by Architectural Record and sponsored by Technical Glass Products. I'm your moderator, Derek Teal, Content Deployment Manager at Architectural Record. Thanks for joining us. Today's presenter is Urmila Soel. Urmila has 18 years of experience in the fenestration industry. She is the Technical and Advocacy Director for the National Glass Association, with duties that include managing all technical activities within NGA's 4 committees, as well as specific roles in ASTM International, ASHRAE, and ISO. Urmila earned both her Bachelor and Master of Science degrees in Civil Engineering from Texas Tech University and is a licensed professional engineer. Today's event is being recorded and archived on architecturalrecord.com/webinars. This course is approved for 1 AIA-LU HSW, 1 AIBD PCE, and 0.1 ISET CEU. It may also qualify for learning hours through most Canadian architectural associations. You do not need to be an AIA member in order to receive a certificate. This presentation is protected by U.S. and international copyright laws. Reproduction, distribution, display, and use of the presentation without written permission of the speaker is strictly prohibited. And learning objectives for this webinar are: 1. Gain a better understanding of forced entry security threats in educational facilities. 2. Demonstrate Fema Guidelines and best practices for designing safer schools as they relate to school layout and recommended building products. 3. Compare and contrast the concept of safety versus security in relation to test standards and code requirements for schools. And 4. Explore the various glazing product configurations used to slow the amount of time it takes an intruder to gain access to an educational facility. And now I'm excited to turn it over to our presenter, Urmila.
Thank you, Derek, and thank you everyone for joining us today for this presentation. So, to get started with a little bit of a background and dig a little bit deeper into school shootings itself. So the first recording shooting was actually on July 26th of 1794. No, that's not a typo on the year. It's actually 225 years ago in the Greencastle area in Pennsylvania, of which 10 people were killed, and that was actually named the school Pontiac's Rebellion School Massacre. To date, the 2 deadliest school shootings have been Virginia Tech shooting back in 2007, which resulted in about 33 deaths, and Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting in 2012, which resulted in about 28 deaths. Every Town for Gun Safety database, which is the figure on your right-hand side, reports that since 2013, there have been at least 476 incidents of gunfire on school grounds in the United States. For 2019 alone, there's been 72 incidents of gunfire on school grounds, resulting in 11 deaths, including 3 suicide deaths and 44 injuries. In 2018, the United States Department of Homeland Security published a 29-page guide for preventing and protecting against gun violence, in which they had some data published in there that was captured by the FBI in 2017, in which the data says between the year 2000 and 2017, there were 250 active shooter incidents. The FBI define active shooter as an individual actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a populated area. This graphic shows that out of those 250 active shooter incidents, there are 37 of them that have to do with schools K through 12 and 15 for higher education institutions, of which the majority is businesses and commerce, and the rest of the data is seen on the screen. So as you can see, there's a disconnect. There's a little bit of a disconnect between these 2 numbers. The Civil Rights Data Collection of 2018 required every public school, which are more than 96,000 schools, to answer a wide range of issues. It asked simple questions, what sounded like simple questions anyway, asked about for the school year of 2015 and 2016, has there been at least 1 incident at your school that involved a shooting, regardless of whether people were hurt? The answer, 240 schools reported at least one incident involving a school-related shooting. 240 schools is 0.2% of all schools in the United States. So the government's definition of, included any discharge of a weapon at a school-sponsored event or school bus. So with that rate of shooting of 240 in one school year, and the level of violence should be so much higher. So for comparison, the Everytown Gun Safety Database listed just 29 shootings in that same time frame, which is mid-August of 2015 and June of 2016. So NPR did a little bit of digging, and they were curious as to why the disconnect of these data points and what exactly does this mean. So in 2018, they reached out to all 240 school districts and schools, of which 161 of them reported that to NPR that there really hasn't been a shooting. And so why did they respond to that question in such a manner? They said at least 37 in the Cleveland area alone reported that the number may have been intended for the previous question that was asked in the survey. And 26 in the Ventura County, California area said that they had misrepresented the numbers. They didn't quite understand the question. And only 11 were actually confirmed independently by NPR. So out of the 240, there was 11 compared, 11 confirmed independently by NPR for the school incident. And that same time frame with the gun safety database had 29 of them. So even though there's a disconnect of all of these numbers, in 2018 alone, there were 53 new safety laws that were passed in various states. Districts are spending millions of dollars to harden schools with new security measures and equipment. Children are spending class time on active shooter drills, and parents are buying bulletproof, quote unquote, a backpack. Back in 2012, the United States Department of Homeland Security published a 317-page primer on designing safer schools in case of terrorist attacks and school shootings, in which in that primer it identified the potential school attackers are those that choose their target to maximize the impact and with minimum effort. And schools are perceived as an easy target. And successful target to them, for the shooter, would mean to induce psychological shock and instill fear in the community. Back in 2018, Homeland Security also published a document, the K-12 Security, a guide for preventing and protecting against gun violence. And they list these warning signs that includes students with erratic, unsafe, or aggressive behaviors, hostile feelings, within the workplace, drug and alcohol abuse, and the list went on. It should be noted that school attacks are rarely sudden and impulsive. Others usually know the attacker's plan and idea before the actual attack happens. Let's talk about schools and the actual building itself. It's not just for teaching. It's not just for teachers and kids. Many schools are used as shelters, the command centers, or meeting places in times of crisis. In hurricane-prone zones like South Florida and any of the coastal areas, when there's a hurricane approaching, at schools, they set up many cots so people can ride out the storms if they don't have a safe place to escape from. And they're used as shelters. Coming up, schools are usually used as polling and voting functions, and consequently ensuring the safety of the students, faculty, and staff in their schools, as well as the safety of the building itself, is incredibly important. It's not just about the teachers and the students itself. So according to a report in 2016 by the Department of Education, the National Center for Education Statistics, there are approximately 56 million students enrolled in American schools. And that enrollment rates are expected to increase over the next 10 years. And whereas many Americans feel that schools should be the safest place for our students, for our children, and sometimes a school should be safer than the homes in which they live in. And so Security is not just a standalone capability. It's a critical design consideration that should be continually reviewed by architects and through design phase and through construction, or we have it like retrofit into the building use phase. So how secure are our schools? Most schools are around 40 to 50 years old. And 45% of them were built in the 1950s to 1969, and 28% were built before 1950. So let's ask, why are these years important? ANSI Z97.1, which is the voluntary safety glazing standard, was created in 1966. The CPSC federal mandate for safety glazing was adopted in 1977. So as you can see from these two dates, that if you have so many schools built before there was an actual voluntary safety standard, and before that safety standard was mandated, then majority of your schools, about 44% of them, do not have any type of security. It should be noted that CPSC, which is the Consumer Product Safety Commission, adopted the ANSI Z97 2015 standard as its standard in 2016. So I have a question for the audience today. How important is school safety to you when designing schools? Extremely important, very important, somewhat important, or not so important, or not important at all? I'll give you about a couple seconds to respond to that. Just a couple more seconds for some of you to get your last minute voting in. Awesome. Well, 190 of you, which is 75% of you, said it was extremely important to you and very important. So far, no one said not important or not important at all. So thank you for that information. Let's start talking about the actual design of Safer School. There's a Fema Guideline, which is the Federal Emergency Management Agency, discuss different layers of school. And the first layer is, consists of the natural or man-made barriers, usually up to the property line or sidewalk or the curb line, and it's usually like a fenced-in area or an engineered standoff. The second or the middle layer usually extends from the perimeter of the school to the exterior face of the school, and that includes like your playground, your shrubbery, and all things around the school. And the third layer is the inner layer, which is the actual building envelope itself. So what did the primer talk about? What did they decide about the actual building itself? So one of the things that they discussed is that your glazed areas, which is your window openings and should be perpendicular to the primary building facade, whereas your primary building facade or the opening to the school should face the street. And that way, if there's an attacker coming, they'll have to go around the school, and it would not be easy access for them to get into the windows. Within the Fema guidelines, it also discussed that well-lit classrooms are safer, and natural light does not depend on the power source. So in case someone were to set the emergency lights or anything like that. And then in the Fema guidelines, they discussed considering using burglary or ballistic resistant glazing at high-risk school areas. They define high-risk school as those located closer to a highway system or a railway system, so they can have easy access to escaping. And one of the main components to this Fema guidelines on designing safer schools is to consider use of laminated glass instead of conventional glass. Additionally, designing the school, the safety, the guidelines for a safer school is to place windows away from the doors. So that way, if the windows are broken, the doors cannot be unlocked. You can't really like break a window and then reach around and get to the lock. It talks about placing horizontal windows at least 6 feet above the finished floor, so that way you just can't bust out the window and walk in. And then consider using steel window frames securely fastened to the cement rather than surrounding. So what exactly does the National Building Code say about the building safer and secure school? For those of you who work with the International Building Code and use the codes, you would know that Chapter 24 is a glass and glazing section. Within the Chapter 24, it talks about safety glazing, which minimizes cutting or piercing injuries, which means tempered glass or laminated glass for that ANSI standard. It also talks about wired glass is not permitted as a safety glazing material. Within Chapter 24, it discussed that laminated glass can be used for slope glazing and skylines. And it talks about glass railings, tempered and or heat strengthened glass are required. Within the building codes, it also talks about walkways, elevator hoistways, and elevator cars has to be laminated glass. However, there are no requirements for security glazing. The only security glazing reference in the International Building Code is for fire in section 408.7. So let's discuss about safety versus security then. So building codes has to do with safety. So safety glazing is a protection against accidental human impact, protection against falling glass due to natural causes of breakage, windborne debris from hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, wind loads, etc. And these are building code-driven applications. Whereas security is defined as protection against forced entry, against ballistics, protection against blast. These are voluntary standards. So some of the standards I listed in the next few slides give an overview of the consensus standards developed by recognized standard development organizations. These slides just have a list and kind of their main impact. So a couple of things to note. For the forced entry itself, it's the blunt and sharp impact, thermal and chemical attacks. That's an ASTM F1233. F1915 are larger blunt and sharp impacts. HP White has a standard that has both blunt and sharp impacts plus ballistics. And then UL has just a ball drop for burglary. And ASTM 2395 is a systems test for windows and doors. They have different tools on the actual framing itself as well as the missile impact on glazing. It has a crowbar or pry bar and trying to get the glazing out of the system. Then some of the bullet resistance standards that are also voluntary. You have a UL standard, that's bullet resistance equipment, NIJ standards, and WMFL standards or ballistic and force entry. And what does that mean? It means that you shoot at the glass at different levels and different categories. And after that, you try to use a hammer or some type of sharp object to get through the glazing after it was shot at. And then you have blast resistant standards. This is more for your bomb blast, and I listed several of these, but this presentation will not really go into blast itself. Here's a summary slide that talks about the different security glazings out there. And so I wanted to make sure that you have this slide that shows the different types of protection you're able to design towards. The window door system with the frame only, you have those three standards listed there. You have, windows, various tools, no glazing impact. Then you have the security glazing testing, which is the glass only. So this is the actual opening itself, not the frame. And then you have the systems testing, which is the frame plus the glass. And it's important to note that ASTM 2395 is a test. It's the standard specification for voluntary security performance of windows, doors, assemblies with and without glazing. And in there, one of the tables shows a pretty good example of some of the glazing that's currently out there. So if you have laminated glass systems or hurricane zone or impact zones, and you have a framing that was tested for certain types of, burglary resistance or forced entry, you can offer some protection to schools right now. So in many buildings, there are more than one threat, and that may affect the design itself. Typically, you have multiple threats. You have burglary or hurricane, ballistic, safety, blast, or forced entry or fire. But in addition to these major threats, you can have additional features like acoustical performance or enjoy the view for aesthetics, energy performance for the building codes, solar performance, and UV protection. So what are some of the makeup of the glazing that you can design within school? For security glazing configurations, one example is tempered glass. So tempered glass currently is for safety. This is the type of glass in which once it's impacted, it will break into very small pieces as to not cause injury or to not cause harm. It is not, it's something that's more for safety and daylighting. It is not bullet resistant. If you put a film on the tempered glass, you're able to have a little bit of a retrofit on this and offer a little bit more of a forced entry or blast safety as well, fire rated with films, and then daylighting. If you are going to put film, it must be anchored to the frame itself. Just a daylight applied film is not going to get you the benefits that you're looking for. It should note that I have daylighting listed on all of these slides because there are studies that show that 21% increase in students' test scores and improve student behavior and teacher retention, and people are happier when they have access to daylighting. So using glass and glazing in the buildings will keep people there, but also it's going to kind of help with occupants itself. On the security glazing configurations, you have laminated glazing. The laminated is pretty much two pieces of glass with different inner layers in between them. You have enhanced force entry, enhanced blast, enhanced safety. It's contained when it's broken. It's enhanced acoustical, fire rating, as well as daylighting. Additionally, it can take, like 10 plus hits on a ball peen hammer, and it's like mostly used for like smash and grab or somebody who's trying to get in, even with a bullet. It's not bullet resistant. However, it will offer the time delay, and that's what you're looking for when you're designing for schools and for buildings. Additional safety glazing configuration that has even more enhanced force entry and enhanced blast and safety containment, hurricane impact, enhanced acoustical, energy efficiency, and daylighting are your double laminated glass on the upper right, and then as well as just a single piece of glass with a laminated on the interior side. And all of these options are out there that you're able to offer some type of security glazing for your school that offers a little bit of a time delay in getting responders to the school should there be an incident. And the last configuration that I have is multiple ply laminate. You have the glass inside, outside with several different layers. You have double laminated and different types. And of course, this is even more enhanced force entry, enhanced blast, safety, containment when broken, ballistics, hurricane, some tornado, and enhanced acoustical, fire rated, and as like I mentioned, daylighting as well. So how do you select your security type? So there's different types. So you have your basic type of impact, enhanced force entry plus ballistics, and a ballistic protection. And this is in reference from the National Glass Association technical paper that will be published soon on security glazing itself, in which they define basic as human impact. So somebody running up against the actual glass itself, and it contains upon breakage. So this is your typical laminated glass. Is an immediate deterrence to entry of the building. It's reduced ability to reach and release. So if you can't just punch an opening and open up a door, and it's minimum requirements for lobbies, entries, for first floor windows and doors. You have enhanced, which is ASTM 2395, that stimulates a weapon impact by 2x4, which is a 2x4 missile going at different speeds for a hurricane impact. The reason why this test was selected was because it's repeatable. It's been out in the industry for quite some time, and industry accepted practice. It has different levels of protection and extended deterrence for entry, and it's affordable. Other than going straight ballistic. The next section is forced entry. So repeated assault, somebody trying to get in with a hammer, or having more of a like a baseball bat, longer duration deterrence, non-monitor area, and high risk glazing. You also have forced entry plus ballistics, which is the ballistic assault followed by the actual forced entry. So there's a shot at the glass itself, and then there's the hammer impact, try to gain entry and try to get the glass and glazing portion off so that you can walk into the building. These are used in a very high risk areas. Deterrence of time is extended, and the protection of occupants are a little bit higher. Then, of course, you have ballistic protection, which is ballistic assault using various ammunition classes with no penetration whatsoever. So I want to discuss some of the current applications that are out there right now, and some examples of which some school districts have chosen to upgrade or, for new building projects. So here's one of the applications in which they secured a visitor entrance area. This area, this is Foley Elementary School, was reconfigured to use the existing door frame itself on the side light to accommodate security glass. And so what they added was a UL 752 level 2 glass polycarbonate opening, and they have a bullet resistance with a deal tray. So you can have a communication back and forth, however, there's no entry into that area at all. Another upgrade of a security system is in Sauk Rapids Rice Schools. And this is something in which they added an interior vestibule directing traffic to the actual office itself. There's a transaction window and a reception desk, and they have ballistic glazing there. Some of the new construction applications is the elementary school in the Slidell, Louisiana area. This is laminated glass and insulating laminated glass, and you can see the use of color in there that brings in the natural daylighting and kind of makes it more of you're able to see out as well as in, and it offers a lot of protection and for decorative as well as acoustic. Were there. And then additionally, here's another new construction. You have sustainability features that include extensive daylighting and exterior sun shading. This particular project, the building layout creates a secure area for students. It's on the interior side of the building itself, so that way there's no street frontage or any access to the outdoors at all. And the use of natural daylighting for the rest of the areas, you're able to see outside as well as in and see a potential threat as it's coming. An additional one on new construction, this here was laminated glazing for enhanced security. You're able to see the entryway here in Martin Luther King School in the Detroit Public School in Michigan. And you're able to see natural daylighting coming out. You're able to see inside as well as out, and it offers the protection and the enhanced security for the building. And here's another one. This is Sandy Hook Elementary School that was redone. The security, the schoolroom classrooms, they chose to rebuild with the bullet resistance windows, which allows daylighting and views with unobstructed light, sight lights approaching threats at the ground level. You're able to see what's coming at you. They incorporate a lot of aesthetics and beauty, a lot of color inner layers for the fun, and they try to have it as much as lighthearted, environment for the children. And of course, it offers acoustics, and this particular project has some exterior vertical shades as well. So these are some of the examples of school upgrades and also for new construction. And I'm hoping you're able to see that you're able to still design with glass and still get your security as well as aesthetics with the use of glass. So what are some of the public responses to these threats? There's a lot of news on here, and a lot of the districts don't necessarily have the type of money to spend on an upgrade or new construction. A lot of public schools decide to have security guards or police visits the schools at varying different times. They have surveillance cameras, alarm systems, security glazing in doors and windows, just physical barriers. The discussion about arming teachers has been brought up in several different areas. And then you also have the bullet-resistant backpack insert. Many school districts are thinking about hardening the door or the hardware itself, replacing windows and doors with enhanced glazing, adding bars and grills to the existing window, and some are adding film to the interior side. There's a paper by the International Window Film Association, and that kind of specifies what can and cannot be done with window films. And it's in that paper, it's noted that, there isn't a film out there that is bullet resistant at all. No matter what the marketing has said, it works with the glass. And if you are going to use a window film, the glass retention with the film is only when it's actually anchored to the frame. And that's one of their major notes on their site. So what are some of the industry initiatives that's going on? Right now, the focus is on products for delaying entry. There was some, if there's a school and there's a police, building across the street or within a block, of course, that's less time than when you have someone, a school that's in a rural area that's 10 minutes away or so. The majority of schools are within a few minutes away from first responders. So having something that's completely designed for, bullet resistance and all of that, and because of that discussion, there's a lot of districts that say, I cannot afford having a building fully bullet resistant. However, having the laminated glass, having different types of glazing that buys you the time, it is very, very important. So pretty much right now, the industry is focused on all the different products out there that you're able to delay entry and allow people to react, giving the school time to lock down, call the first responders. And there's also enhanced high-performance laminated and film products that are very effective in slowing down intruders and gives you a few seconds where seconds count in all of this. Additionally, NFPA, the National Fire Protection Agency, 3000, have a standard, that was published or republished in 2018. The standard is for active shooter and hostile event response, the ASHER program. Within that standard, it talks about, addresses some of the common preparation among first responders, the community crisis communications, the hospitals, and it talks about three different major elements. You need to plan first and work together to assess the risk itself. What do you see as your gaps? What are an integrated plan within the entire community? The second one is to respond, deploy a unified, coordinated plan with assigned roles and responsibilities. Have each person, be involved with a specific duty if something were to happen, and recover. The longest lasting and most complex phase requires forethought, preparation, and attention. The development of this standard was actually initiated by request to NFPA from the chief from Otto Drod, I think I'm pronouncing his name wrong, of Orange County, Florida, Fire and Rescue. He approached NFPA following a deadly shooting at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando. He said first responders need a uniform method of preparation and communication. So that way fire knows what to do, police knows what to do, EMS and hospitals. So that way there's a unified incident command during an event and common recovery strategies for communities. And so that's how this program was developed. NFPA offers an online training to qualify individuals to work with communities, develop their own programs. ASTM International, this is one of the standard development organizations that I mentioned earlier, and many of their testing standards. So ASTM last year started a joint task group between two of their committees, F12 and E54. Their scope, actually the title is A New Guide for Minimizing the Effectiveness of Armed Aggressors in Educational Institutions. Their scope is the best practice. A document is intended to assist educational institutions to design, specify, and field vetted security concepts and solutions. Their next meeting is actually next Monday in Houston. So in their document, they have 12 sections in which they're hoping to have this go to ballot by the end of next year. They're looking, the first section is the threat. You have to have a risk assessment for these buildings. What are your threats? What are your vulnerabilities? Intervention and prevention of what's going on, and the perimeters. What do you have as perimeters, and the layout of each of the buildings, and what can be done with your layout, with your existing perimeter. Systems and technology. What are some of the systems and technologies you can put in? Is it cameras? Is it a checkpoint in a school to where you're able to press a button? Do you have a vestibule? Do you have an area to where you have somebody needs to call in to be let in? You have the different building components. Take a stock of what you actually have as the building components itself. It's not just a glass issue. It's a fire alarm issue. If the fire alarm is pulled on the exterior, what happens? All of your doors automatically open. So it doesn't matter if you have bullet-resistant glazing doors or windows. Once you pull the fire alarm, everybody exits. And that has been, I think, in one of the shootings that had shown that. It talks about your operations, talks about your drills and exercises, and getting people prepared, getting the teachers and faculty prepared. Talks about security, considering the learning environment. And then they'll have a summary of existing guidance and knowledge based on all of the published documentation out there right now from different parties. And then you have a third-party inspection and certification of the actual installation itself. And of course, there's funding discussion. Who's going to pay for all of this? I mentioned at the top of the hour or at the top of the presentation that we have so many different schools, almost 50% of them don't have any type of security at all. At the International Building Code, they have an ad hoc committee on building safety and security. So the scope of their effort is likely to evolve over time. So about a year or so ago, maybe about 18 months, they started with this is in response to what do we do as the International Code Community and our Code Council. And they want to have a stock of all of the standards that are out there, all of the codes. So they have a comprehensive review of requirements as they relate to developing any type of balance between the facility security and safety considerations. That goes back to that discussion about safety versus security. They have it's a pretty good website on. I have the live link on there. It has a list of all of the FBI reports, the Homeland Security documents, the FEMA documents, the NFPA documents, and it discussed everything that's out there currently on schools and the security for buildings. And so when they have, when they actually get together and have their standard or how they would like to respond, they figure they'll have a list of every single thing that's out there, as well as how to change the actual codes itself. And a couple of the references that we have, it's some of the building and infrastructure primers that I have mentioned, NPR article that I mentioned on here, the Everytown Research, the database for gunfire in school, and then the U.S. Department Civil Rights Data Collection, as well as the references for the guide for preventing and protecting gun violence, and as I mentioned, the discussion on the ad hoc committee there. So there's many things going on within the industry. There's a lot of activities that are continuing to go on. One thing to note that within the Glass Association, we do have some bulletins that we are working on with the industry, with the code bodies. There's a GICC, which is a Glazing Industry Code Committee, is working with manufacturers and fabricators on the different types of information that's out there, and trying to educate specifiers and designers as to how to, work on a retrofit right now, as well as new construction. So my conclusion for today's webinar is school structure needs to be functional. It needs to be something in which it's not just for kids and teachers from 7:30 in the morning when kids get there and, till 5 o'clock when the teachers leave. It's, the security threats and attacks are unpredictable. It's not just when you have a police officer coming by, it's all the time. The security glazing of the exterior envelope is critical to help provide a reaction time for occupants and first responders. Every single second counts. And so buying time with any type of hardening of the building envelope helps with all of this. And clearly, there's a need for the building codes to engage. And they are, and they're looking at all of the stakeholders and how to ensure the building is secure for everyone. And this is a slide I was mentioning about the National Glass Association. We have an advocacy committee and a fabricating committee are working on the security glass technical paper. The next meeting is in January of 2020 in La Jolla, California, and there's a list of all of the different types of information bulletins on bullet resistant, detention facilities, protective glazing, many other documents, including some articles that talks about commercial glass and metals side and what's available on the marketplace right now for the different types of applications. And to realize that there's many different levels of protection. It just depends on what you would like to do as a design community.